Okay, good morning, afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the SIG CLI meeting for September 12th. I will begin with a few announcements. We have basically a Zoom number change coming up. It was supposed to potentially have happened by now, but apologize for the delay on that. It will happen within the upcoming weeks, and we will send an announcement when that does happen. Your calendar will also change so that the link you click on your calendar entry will now take you, when that happens, it'll take you to the new meeting number. There are some announcements regarding the plugin mechanism updates as well as the CLI runtime updates. So if you recall from previous meetings, we had been essentially working on making the plugin mechanism basically making it better so that it can address a few extendability problems. And so as part of the whole revamp with the plugin mechanism, we have put out a new repo called CLI Runtime, which serves as a sort of SDK for plugin developers to use when creating plugins. And so we have a link to the KEP in the previous meeting notes. Feel free to browse the KEP. Feel free to browse the CLI runtime and sample CLI plugin repos as well. What this means is that the sample CLI plugin now serves as a blueprint for anybody to create a plugin in Go. It serves as a blueprint for anybody to use the CLI runtime if they create their plugin in Go, to essentially use those utilities to aid them in the plugin creation process. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us in the SIG CLI channel. And with that said, there is a 1.12 planned release date of September 25th. The date is the same as was announced last time, and it has not changed. Yeah, basically what that means is that master will reopen for 1.13 in September 18th. And we have a 1.12 retrospective and 1.13 planning during the next meeting. We will be reaching out to Paris for that as well. So if you would like to share anything or listen in to anything we have to say regarding the last release, please join us in the next meeting for that. Up next is a quick update on the test grid. So I was on call for the last 2 weeks. There was not much activity. However, as of this morning at least, there were 2 failures, both related to GKE. So one related to GKE serial and the other to just the simple GKE E2E tests. Both issues have been reported, so there is an issue open that sort of addresses both. And the main issue seems to be stemming from just GCP issues. And so we're waiting on the GCP team to comment on this. Aside from that, feel free to check out the test grid yourself. And if you have not yet signed yourself up, consider volunteering yourself for 2 weeks in the future if you would like to be the on-call for the test grid. All that it consists of is simply watching the test grid, reporting any issues, opening issues, and helping to resolve any issues that you see that are related to the SIG CLI test grid. If you have any questions, also please feel free to reach out in the SIG CLI channel. So now moving on to topics. First one up is extended functionality for watching events. So I have actually placed a Google Doc link on there. And this was mainly a request that we received from Clayton. Basically, watching events could be improved by adding a sort of filtering mechanism. It's not yet clear how we want to approach this, but there are a few use cases that have been noted on there. The main thing people want is they want to either filter to only watch certain events for a given resource, for example. They want to know essentially when a specific event happens, and then they want to take action when that event happens. There were a few overlapping requests with the wait functionality that was introduced recently to kube control. So people wanted to watch events until they were deleted, or watch events for a resource until that resource was created. And so there's some discussion as to whether or not that logic entirely belongs within the wait command. So feel free to add comments to the Google Doc. Let me know if you can't access it, and I will give you access to the Google Doc. But yeah, the main gist behind this proposal, or semi-proposal, is to at least get ourselves thinking, of ways to improve the watch functionality. So a major feature we could consider for this could be to either add a new command or perhaps introduce it via a plugin functionality. But if we do go the route of adding a new command, we can have a command specifically for watch logic that essentially has filtering baked in, as well as essentially cross functionality with the kubectl wait command. So what I will do is I will try to get a cap open for this if we feel that this is something we're going to pursue for the next release, and we can have further discussion as part of that cap. With the watch functionality in mind, we have been tackling, or we've set our sights to tackle updating that functionality as well, so that it works with server-side printing. So the watch functionality that currently exists with the get command in kubectl is currently the last piece of kubectl get that does not work with server-side printing. So far, sorting has been updated, as well as any other remaining pieces. But watch still relies on the old code path that essentially involves looking up a handler for a resource. And so I believe for the next release, we should make a focus to essentially update that remaining piece so that we no longer have, or we have one less dependency on non-server-side printing and anything associated with that. With that, I will give the floor to Sean for the next topic regarding kubectl extraction from the Kubernetes core.
So there's not really much to update. When we created the spreadsheet describing the remaining items necessary to pull kubectl out of core, we realized that there were some dependencies that were very sticky and very difficult to extract. Specifically, there's still the printing, and there's the package printing, which has a lot of dependencies with transitive dependencies within core, as well as many files which depend on it, as well as the testing package and the test API. So those dependencies in particular looked insuperable and very difficult to snip. So we haven't really, we're actually looking at different directions now as to how we intend to develop outside of core.
So I have a proposal with regards to printers, because we will be stuck with the printers for probably several releases still. Mm-hmm. We don't have server-side printing fully working yet. Mm-hmm. But to be able to extract ourselves from the main core repo, I'm inclined to copy the printers as external versions to kubectl, so that at some point in time we will have the split. The internal versions, there is a risk that for some time it might happen that there will be a mismatch between the printers, so we just need to ensure that both the printers are actually returning the same results. But that will at least gives us a starting point for the extractions, because currently the printers is one of the biggest issues. The remaining issues are somewhat manageable. The printers is the biggest offender as of today. So we will eventually switch to server-side printing everywhere and everything. And so basically the code, the printers, the external printers that we could extend to the separate repo would be part of code that will just be removed when we switch to the server side entirely, and when we remove the printing stack entirely from kubectl. But until that point, my proposal is to create the externals, live with them for a couple of releases, probably next year or so, and then when we get rid of the printing stack, we'll just remove them. I don't know how others feel about it.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable band-aid for the time being, especially since it does unblock majority of the conflicts, I guess, from separating Kube from the core repo. So I would say, so long as we have some mechanism in place to either keep the external copies for the print handlers from diverging from the internal ones, or maybe freeze any updates to both so that we don't diverge in any way, I would be okay with this. So long as we're conscious of the fact that it is a temporary measure, and that we would need to get rid of the external copies of the print handlers, as soon as we can, as soon as we're able to, essentially. Like you said, resort to server-side printing for the client side, and then leave the internal print handlers exclusively to the server.
I think that we have an integration test in place for ensuring that there's no difference between server-side printing and regular printing. So creating a similar one will actually, just this test that we already have in place should ensure that we don't diverge. Because if we do diverge, that means that something broke and the test should fail. If the test doesn't fail, we need to improve the current test for the server-side printing to ensure that whatever is returned by the server is the same as you would do with a regular kubectl printing. Currently, the test is fairly simple, but very good, I hope. Similar to the etcd storage test that we have, if I remember correctly. So we could build on that test if it's not sufficient as of yet.
Okay, that sounds good to me, if we're willing to consider this.
I was in transit. I was listening to most of that, but cut out a couple times. Was that the plan was to copy essentially code we need over to the new repo?
Yeah, this is mostly about the printers, because we will be stuck with the printers for at least a year or so until we fully remove the printing stack from the kubectl.
Like, so if we copy it, we can just say we're never going to touch that code, right? Only going to delete it, right?
Yeah, that's basically the main gist. That eventually it will go away, but we just need to ensure that if somebody attaches the server-side printing, the external printers that we have in kubectl has to match whatever the server is printing, so that there's no diverge in both cases.
And why is copying the code as opposed to vendoring it preferred?
So in this case, we basically have a collection of internal handlers that the server uses, but we need those to be external for the client to use it without resorting to depending on server-side code. So rather than vendoring it and having the client still depend on server-side code due to due to needing internal versions of objects, the easiest way to sort of have this band-aid applied is to copy all of the print handlers, have them be external just for the client, and then keep the client away from any server-side pieces.
Yeah, basically, I'm inclined, like I said before, I'm inclined not to do the vendoring. The vendoring will only cause problems and will additionally build the unnecessary dependency on the Kubernetes repo that we hopefully don't want to have.
So vendoring is copying into a directory called vendor, right? That's the only thing it is, right? Or yeah, I think that's the name of the directory, right? And it's having a tool manage the dependency for you. So like, why wouldn't we just copy it into that folder instead of copying it into a different folder where it's not obvious that it's coming from someplace else?
Because we could just go without at all vendoring, which would be just simpler and make the code more reusable for consumers of kubectl.
Do we want people reusing that code? I mean, we don't want anyone to be able to access the code we copy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this would only be for the client, only for kube control, and only as a stopgap measure while we finish server-side printing throughout the client.
Okay. I guess I still don't understand why the folder that it ends up in is changes effectively the complexity of it. But I don't really have a strong opinion about it. If we just want to copy all the code into another directory, that's fine too.
I think we had a discussion about the vendoring thing some time ago. If I remember correctly, David laid out significant problems with it, and honestly, from dealing with the vendors that we do in OpenShift, yeah, as if it's possible to leave the vendoring behind, it's always a good idea. So if we can go with that, and especially that we went all the way up to this point where the majority of commands is working with the client Go and the external libraries that we have available, it would be in a way foolish to go back, try to re-vendor, and have parts of the code that will be actually working with the external versions and others which will be internals. There's one other caveat that I think that's worth, maybe we don't have to update the old printing stack, and we will just freeze the code that we will copy over as externals in kubectl. And since it is deprecated, we will just freeze it as is, and we will allow the diverge so that we will encourage more people to actually start using the server-side print, which is also by default on currently.
I think if we copy it over, we have to freeze it. We can't manually have someone doing diffs between files and updating them. And just to clarify, I wasn't asking about vendoring the whole Kubernetes repo. I guess my question is if you just want the internal API package, right? Like one way of getting that is vendoring it and pruning everything else from Kubernetes. In which case, it lives in the vendor directory, but it's at least clear that it's like a read-only thing.
Right, but none of the tools that we currently have available allows you to vendor only certain parts of a project. So we would be making a...
Right, you just say prune unused packages. Or maybe I'm misthinking, but GoDep should allow you to prune any packages you're not using. Oh, well, maybe we should follow up and figure out. This seems like more of a technical detail. The high-level thing is we should copy the code over and use some tool to do that, either one we handwrite or one that already exists.
I'm pretty sure that with the fights that we had, with the Go deb, there were some problems with the pruning, and we just ended up working with the entire project as is. I'm also worried that the majority of code, even the internal APIs, will rely on some helpers, and some weird dependencies will be further injected. And I think that if we have a path towards not vendoring, that would be the one that I would prefer to tackle, honestly.
Yeah, so I think to essentially piggyback on Matcha here, I think a risk of vendoring does end up being that it is the case that we could end up vendoring more packages than we expected, because either you have a connection you can't break, or you have helpers that come along with API packages, like we've seen, with some work we've been doing in Origin, for example. And so, yes, I think I would rather try to save ourselves from potential hassle of vendoring more than we signed up to vendor in the first place, but also, it'd be a quick and more long-term solution, I think, to have kubectl already switched to using client Go and the API package, and extracting it should just be taking the CLI pieces, and that's it.
Okay. Sounds good.
Sounds good. And yes, I think this is definitely something we can all, it is a lot of commands that need to be addressed, but I think as a concerted effort, it is something we could achieve, in the very near future. Yeah. So with that said, are there any more questions or comments regarding the kubectl extraction topic before we move on to the next topic?
I didn't have anything else. Please have a look at the spreadsheet, and any feedback on how to accomplish some of those snips would be very helpful.
Definitely, I'll take a look at it right now. Okay, so if there are no further comments or questions, is Antoine here for this topic?
Hello. Hi. Yeah, so I want to talk about kubectl diff. It's a feature that I want to promote in beta in the next release in 1.13. It's been alpha for a while now, I think since 1.9 or something. The reason why it's not been promoted before is that, one, the way we computed the merge was sort of done through a different way than it is when you apply. So we had this different logic for merging the objects, which is different from what would happen if you apply the object. That's one thing. And the other thing is that I wasn't super excited about the interface. But now we have dry run, so we can actually dry run apply the patch and see exactly what would have happened if the patch had been applied. And I also found a better interface, a simplification of the interface. And I'm trying to align it with apply. So the goal is to be able to do kubectl diff my configuration files, and that's going to show you exactly what's going to happen to your configuration, your object on the server, before you can do apply. So for example, when you want to create an object, you're going to do kubectl-f my diff my file, and it's going to show you what object is going to be created on the server. As it's going to be modified by the admission chain, it's not just like dry run on the client, it's going to be the full object. So you'll see the defaults, you'll see everything. And if you change, once this object has been created, if you change a field and you do a diff again, it's going to show you just the field that has been changed. So that's pretty convenient. For example, if you update the image version and you're on diff again, you'll see just two lines, one being you used to have version A and now you have version B. So that's going to be super convenient, and that's the interface that we're going to keep. So it's going to be just kubectl diff-f, the file, and then you see what has changed. And if if you're happy with the changes, you can proceed and do kubectl apply-f. Also, at the same time, obviously, I'm going to move it out of kubectl alpha subcommand because it's hidden there and nobody knows that it's there. That's it.
Sorry, I'm quickly looking over the CAP, but are there any questions regarding this topic?
So this will be more like a handy way of doing kubectl apply -- try run, and then diffing the file that you applied and what you got from the server, right?
Yeah, exactly. The way I see it, it's a convenient tool to visualize the output of applied dry run. It's a convenient way to see what would have happened on the server.
No, that makes sense. I'm assuming that it will be supporting the usual diff options such as unified, etc., etc.
Yeah, so you can use your you can specify your own diff tool. So if you want to use meld or even like a UI, you can use that through a environment variable.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah.
We're not going to support pruning yet. I think eventually it's going to be useful to have pruning, for example, so that if a file has disappeared, then you see it being removed. Right now, we don't have that. So new files are going to be shown as new files and changes as changes, but deleted files are just ignored.
And that's true for apply as well, for the most part.
Yeah, unless you use the prune options, which
the alpha prune that says if you use this, you're going to destroy your production cluster.
We don't have that in diff.
No one should be using prune.
Yeah. But eventually, we will support that thing in diff as well, right?
Right. So if we end up supporting
with apply,
if we end up supporting prune in a good way, we'll definitely include that in diff. Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious. Okay, that sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Are there any more questions or comments regarding kubectl diff? Okay, hearing none. Phil, I will hand over the floor to you for column printing for CRDs.
Okay, I don't know. I guess this must be left over from last time because I don't think I added it this time.
Yes, carried over.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for carrying that over. I don't think I had a whole lot to say on this other than that for aggregate APIs, we have a way of saying for column printing, just like here's the list of fields. So kubectl already supports printing a resource as a list of columns by providing the list of columns as a flag. And so it makes it look like the normal wide format, but you customize it declaratively instead of imperatively or something else. So we support this for aggregate APIs. For CRDs, like it would be pretty trivial to support this and allow CRDs to describe declaratively like what columns should be printed as part of the CRD. And that would give us kind of a stopgap until server-side printing is supported for CRDs.
Okay, so I left it in the agenda intentionally until you're back because I wasn't sure if this is what you meant by this note. So currently inside of the CRDs, there is a spec that allows you to decide what will be printed for the server-side printing. So there is a field inside of the CRD specification that says additional columns. By default, every CRD will print name and a creation timestamp. If you specify the additional columns, which is the name of the field, the JSON path inside of your CRD, and the third that I can't remember off the top of my head. And when you do that, the server-side printing will read the definition of your CRD, will always print the name and then instead of the creation timestamp, it will add the fields that you defined in your CRD definition.
Awesome. That's done?
Yeah, that's already implemented. We had
Okay.
a discussion, I think 2 weeks ago, because, oh, I know what's the third field. The third field is a priority. And we had a discussion 2 weeks ago, about 4 weeks ago, about the priority, because the priority is an integer currently, but it works as a Boolean field, meaning that if you specify a field with a 0, it will get printed by default. If you specify anything bigger than 0, then it will only get printed if you specify the white output. That was initially done like that, and it is intentional because I was scratching my head on it some time ago. So yeah, maybe at some point in time. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't quite understand that. The default is, I thought the default get is wide output. Are those different things?
No, the default is not white.
Okay, what's the default?
Name for get.
Yeah, I believe the default columns that are printed are just name and age, I believe. I'll have to double check.
Are we talking about for CRDs only?
Wait, because we're talking about a couple of things now. Are you asking about the priority field or about the default fields that are printed for server-side for CRDs?
Okay, I guess I was thinking, so when I do kubectl get deployment, that shows me the same column as get deployment -o wide, right?
No, you will get, so I'm not sure for deployments, but there are resources that have extended lists of columns when you specify O wide.
I see.
But default is not wide.
Okay.
By default, we provide you with a limited set of columns, and only wide gives you more than that.
And the wide is based on the priority of that column, correct?
Only for CRDs, yeah. So for CRDs, you specify a Boolean flag whether or not to only include this column as part of the wide output.
I see.
For regular objects, it is hard-coded somewhere in the printers.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you linked an issue for this. I'll just go ahead and close that issue, pointing to how this should be done in the CRDs. You're okay with that one?
Yep, that sounds good.
Cool. Okay, awesome.
Sounds great. Are there any more questions or comments regarding this topic? Okay, hearing none. Next one up is commits and merges. I am not sure who added this, but you have the floor.
So I just added this, and I just wanted to get everybody's feedback on whether or not we think this is useful. I put in a link to a doc which shows what's been merged and committed in package kubectl. And it's only a one-pager, so this maybe will help us keep track of and be able to get feedback on the actual code that's being created under package kubectl. So yeah, it's just a one-pager with several of the, we've got the code free, so there's not that much in there.
Can you repeat what you expect from that? Like, should we take an action?
No, the action is just to have a look at it and see if anybody wants to talk about any of it. I mean, does anybody think this will be useful? So we talk about particular topics, and it feels slightly disconnected from what's really going on, what actually goes on in the code base.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a useful overview. At the very least, to give people a chance to explain, why they've added a certain thing, or to tie that in with the topic they've announced for the SIG meeting.
Yeah,
some changes end up not getting surfaced in this forum, and maybe it's just basically those of us who show. And so, actually, just a quick overview of what has actually happened in the code base seems like it might be useful.
Yeah, I think it'd be great just to have every 2 weeks a quick summary of like all the efforts that have gone on in the past 2 weeks, especially because we have like I think the list usually captures the big initiatives, but I'd be really interested in like all the random bug fixes that people have found, or like flags that I may not be aware of that got added or something like that. It'd be great if these, like, the pull request is a good view, but I think even more interesting would be the breakdown of like, here's the functionality or feature or bugs that were fixed, or like some of these I think can be collapsed into, like, I think there was like 3 or 4 that could have been collapsed into probably one thing.
Okay, I'll try another format next meeting if you guys think this is useful.
Definitely, and yes, I do agree. Maybe presenting it as like a top 10 list of changes, or like last month's overview, or something like that. More of an overview layout. I think that would definitely.
Yeah, I just copied this from GitHub. So I mean, I there's a lot of cleanup that can happen, especially with organizing them under certain topics.
I like the idea of once a month. Like every other week might be a bit. I mean, it's fine, but like every month it would be nice. It'd be great. Like we could have 3 check-ins per release of like, here's stuff that's happening. And it'll probably make writing the release notes a little easier, because we'll go in like having, I don't know, familiarize ourselves with the notes along the way.
Definitely. So I guess with that said, does anybody have or see a commit of theirs that they'd like to talk about briefly?
One comment before you go further. I think we could start with dividing this report into 3 sections. Okay. Bug fixes go into 1 bucket. Major changes, features. Majority of them should be tracked by us during the planning and then retro. But there are some changes that are also done by other SIGs, and it'll be good to track them, definitely. And then Michelangelo's, just, yeah. Not sure what will fall into the 3rd bucket, but I do hope and we can definitely remove, to start with, everything that touches the generated stuff. I don't care about those at all. I've noted there's like at least a couple PRs updating Bazel. I don't care about those at all.
I super care about those. That's the only thing I care about. Updating Bazel files.
Okay, we can have a separate section just for Phil, updating Bazel.
A separate meeting, even. Okay, sorry.
All things Bazel conference.
Okay, thanks, Sean. This is useful.
Thank you, Sean, for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sean. That's definitely useful.
Okay, so I guess if there's not a specific commit at the moment that anybody would like to dive into really quickly, we can leave that for the next meeting then, and start. We could probably start at the next meeting having the overview and have people talk about the changes. So with that being said, we will move on to stand-ups. Does anybody have any like progress status, or any work they've been doing that they'd like to share at this time?
I have one thing maybe that I wouldn't say it's a progress status, but maybe just to follow up. At KubeCon EU, and Umache and I had some conversations about creates. And and it's something I've been thinking about more and more and trying to carve out the time to prototype. I'm planning on doing outside of the core repo, like just an end-to-end prototype of a command, like a generic create command. And as I've thought about it more, I think it's probably not just limited to create. Like, I think there's a lot of commands we have that operate on a single resource, and effectively what they do is they take either a file or a set of flags and use those to generate a request body, and then take the response and then put it, and then format the output. And while for some cases, like you probably need a fully Turing complete language to implement them, I think you can probably get 75% of the way there if you just use like Go templating, right, for formatting the response, which would allow it to be like fully dynamic and not have to be compiled in. And you could probably use Go templating for the request. Like if you look at web browsers, right, web browsers don't statically compile in the site contents, right? Yeah, you can still have like incredibly rich, powerful app experiences interacting with websites, right? Fully dynamically. And I'm not suggesting we go write like JavaScript here or anything, but I think if all we're doing is generating like pretty well structured, well-known requests to well-known endpoints and then emitting some output to a CLI, we could probably get pretty far with just some basic templating, very simple templating.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, we discussed create and set to start with because they were like the simplest to go with. Do you think you could present this topic in more depth with especially the prototype? I'm very curious about it during one of the next meetings. Maybe not the next one because I'm hoping to do the planning and retro the next one, but within the next after that one,
yeah,
that would be more or less. That would be give you some more time to work on it, and I'm very curious about that one because we eventually thought about completely dropping the create and set commands and replace them with the dynamic ones because that would significantly simplify the code, especially a lot of boilerplate that we write when we deal with set commands such as set image, set annotation, set labels, and then create commands.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll maybe not even the next one. I plan to start just prototyping. I'd like to start with a proof of concept just to like show that that like have something demoable, and I can show that it is possible. So maybe once I have a demo, let's say sometime in the next 4 or 6 weeks, I'll give an in-depth presentation on what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. I was looking forward to that one actually.
Awesome. Yeah, it's funny how these things just like slip through your fingers. But by KubeCon Seattle, I will definitely have something concrete.
I'll keep your word.
All right, thanks. That's all for me.
All right, thank you, Phil. Does anybody else have any topics they'd like to share or any progress they'd like to share? Okay, hearing none, looks like we're just in time, so I won't give you any time back. And I will see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for attending.
Thanks, Juan. Bye. Thanks, folks.